What is happening, all of you sexy warriors out there? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the Glock Gen 6 45 with the Radian Ramjet Afterburner combo and a few other upgrades. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, as we mentioned, we are going over my favorite everyday carry handgun, my new favorite, the Glock 45 Gen 6 with the Gen 6 Radian Afterburner and Ramjet combo. This gun shoots phenomenally well, as you guys saw from the intro footage, and phenomenally flat. But I'm going to go through in detail with you guys all of my experiences, the recoil impulse, the reliability, all the upgrades from the Gen 5 to the Gen 6, and just overall my opinion on this handgun and why or why not you should consider one. Starting off with our full disclosures, Glock has no idea who I am. I've bought every single Glock that I own, and they could care less what I say in this review. I'm sure of it. So as far as Radian goes, I do have a relationship with Radian. The guys over there have been very kind to me. They did send out this Gen 6 Afterburner combo. However, that will not affect the review. You guys are gonna get my full, unbiased, and honest opinion, as always, here on the channel. Let's go ahead and start off with reliability. So at this point, I have well over 1,000 rounds on this handgun, which is not a huge round count for a defensive handgun. Out of all the rounds I've put through this thing, 115 grain, 124 grain FMJ, as well as 124 grain HST from Federal here. This is my everyday carry ammunition. All of it functioned phenomenally well. There was one ammo type, one box of ammo, in fact, that I had issues with in this gun, and I believe it is an ammunition issue. I don't think it has anything to do with the Glock, and that was 124 grain jacketed hollow points PMC bronze, I believe it was. I'll roll the footage in so you guys can see, but other than that, I had no issues with reliability, and so I'm gonna chalk that up to an ammo issue, but I did want to disclose that to you guys in case that's a big deal to you. Now, moving on from reliability into the shootability, for lack of a better term. How did this thing shoot? How does it feel to shoot? What's the dot tracking like? The Radian absolutely makes it a game changer. A lot of you guys have probably seen my Gen 6 Glock 17 video, where I was actually running a Gen 5 Radian Afterburner Ramjet in there. While at the time, I believed it was compatible. The Gen 6 had just come out. So I thought the barrel was compatible, but after speaking with Radian, it turns out that it's not technically compatible, even though I had zero issues through that 500 rounds on the Glock 17 with that Gen 5 Ramjet. They don't recommend doing it because there is a relief cut in the barrel on the Gen 6s that Glock claims is required. But I do know that, Radian did come out with their Gen 6, obviously, and so I wanted to show that off to you guys and let you guys know there is an option. Although my Gen 5 worked flawlessly on my Gen 6 Glock, again, for safety reasons, for legal reasons, I cannot say that it is compatible, even though I did in that video. So here's a correction for you, okay? I have to take a moment and pause the video to thank the biggest sponsor of the channel, which is Brownells. If you guys would like to support the channel, please head to rangedaybro.you-know-what. Check out the discounts page. That is the best way to support the channel while saving some dinero at the same time. Make sure you're using those links. Don't buy anything you don't need, but if you're gonna get it anyways, please go ahead and use those links and codes. Love you. Back to the video. Now, with that being said, let's talk about a few of the advantages of running a barrel and comp like this, okay? Let's start with the disadvantages, right? The main disadvantage is you're gonna extend your overall length, which does not matter if you're running a weapon light that is further than the muzzle, as we are with the Surefire X300 Turbo here. And the second disadvantage, as brought to my attention by Bones Maloney in one of his older videos, is the concussive blast that occurs from one of these devices. So if you're using this for a defensive handgun and you have to shoot this from retention or in a vehicle, you might want to consider the concussive blast. I have shot this from retention, and you can feel a bit of a shockwave from this Afterburner Ramjet combo, or any compensator for that matter, whether it be the PMM or insert your favorite one here. You're going to get a little bit of concussive upward shockwave from that. And if you're shooting it from a low retention area at the chest level, let's say you're in a vehicle or in a confined space, or you're shooting it from retention right out of the holster, you may feel a little bit of that, but I don't think it's enough personally to dissuade me from using one, because the advantages of the reduced felt recoil, I think, far outweigh that small risk of getting that concussive blast in the face and disorienting you. If you're using your gun, you're already gonna be in fight or flight mode, and if you're using it from retention or at this level where it's like in line with your face as far as this compensator goes, it's probably a really bad day already. And in that case, I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference, in my humble opinion. Now let's go ahead and talk about the advantage, right? There's one major advantage, and that is gonna be the felt recoil reduction. It is a huge difference in controllability. That dot tracking is much easier to track up and down. And as you guys can see from a lot of the footage, I'm shooting at pretty great distances very quickly. at reduced C-zone targets, so they're just slightly larger than an A-zone on an IPSC target. And this gun makes it very easy to get those quick follow-up shots and maintain your dot awareness, maintain that dot on the target as it just bounces up and down. So that is the major advantage. Another unforeseen advantage that I don't hear many people talking about is actually a velocity gain that you get from having a slightly longer barrel. And I tested this a while ago with a video that got pulled down by YouTube. In fact, I was showing all the data on velocities and whether or not ported barrels slow your bullet down enough to matter as far as expansion goes with the defensive round. But during that test, I found out that the compensated barrels actually increased the muzzle velocity pretty substantially, about 60 to 90 feet per second with various guns. Shooting the same gun with the OEM barrel versus the Radian actually increased the velocity quite a bit. Again, it wasn't a huge amount, but it was definitely a significant amount, I would say, and a big unforeseen advantage, I would call it, in running something like this. So you are extending the length of your slide, but you are actually adding a little bit of velocity. So pretty cool unforeseen consequence of running a compensated barrel. So now that we've covered the Radian, the reliability, the shootability, for lack of a better term, let's go ahead and talk about some of the upgrades from the Gen 5 to the Gen 6. And we'll talk about the setup as we go as well. As I mentioned already, we have the Surefire X300 Turbo on the bottom. I believe it is a requirement to have a weapon mounted light on your gun because half of life is at night. So it's really nice to be able to see what you're shooting at. Yes, it does extend the length of the gun and it does make the holster a bit larger. As you guys can see, this is my Tier 1 concealed covert holster. So typically, if I didn't have this light on there, the holster would end right about here at the front of the gun. As you guys can see, Radian is still slightly recessed. This is actually cut for a Glock 17. But it has an open bottom, so I can run the 45 with a comp, the 17 with a comp, and it doesn't really matter because even the 17 with a comp is still shorter than the pain you're feeling from this lengthened light. The Streamlight TLR1 HL is another good option. It's much cheaper. It's more of a flood than a tight beam like this Turbo is, and it does end quite a bit shorter than the Surefire, right about there by my guess. So the holsters are a little bit more comfortable because they're shorter and they protrude less into the appendix region. If you carry appendix like me, I do love this Surefire X300. I love that if I'm outside, I can really throw some light far away, cut through a lot of visual barriers like fog and things like that. So I really like this X300, but just keep in mind, it is gonna make you pay in the pants. So let's move back to the Radian Ramjet. We've talked about this at length, but very tight lockup here, very little movement in the barrel when you press down on it. It's a solid lockup. It's a very high quality machine part. Also, the way it bolts up, there's just one bolt right here. And that's how you attach it and remove it, which is a phenomenally better system than something like the PMM comp, which I still love. But once you put the PMM comp on, it does not come off. You use red Loctite and you thread it on and you have to time it and use a vise. This is just a ingenious design in my opinion. So I'm a huge fan of this, and it just aesthetically, it looks really, really clean. It fits really well. All the lines are super tight. Looks really good, guys. And there's no other way to put it. Sorry to muzzle you, but you could see there's a little bit of like a diamond pattern. It's not a circle. It's like a very cool looking muzzle with their logo on the front. Big fan of the way this barrel looks and how it performs, obviously. Now moving back to the Gen 6 slide, you guys can see there's some slide serrations here like they have on the Gen 5, but they are actually deeper at the top, which allow you to get a little bit better grip. When you're press checking, if that's your thing, or you're racking the slide, I typically rack my slides from right here instead of going over the top or using my glass. I know a lot of guys just use their glass, and those improved serrations, they are better. I'd still like to see them more aggressive personally, but I don't think you could ever go too aggressive on slide serrations because the only time you're touching it is when you're manipulating the slide. So it's not like this is rubbing up against your body ever. So I don't know why companies don't just go even more aggressive, but it's still an improvement over the Gen 5 in my opinion. They also have the same kind of taper design where it's deeper at the top and then a little bit more shallow at the bottom on the rear serrations. So no complaints there. Now the Gen 6 still comes with the plastic Glock sights, as you guys can see with the U-notch in the back and the little shorty in the front. This is an absolute atrocity in my opinion. I think it's an extreme insult of our intelligence when they say that they're passing on the cost savings to us. There are plenty of other gun companies, handgun companies that make phenomenal guns that ship their guns with acceptably iron, actual steel iron sights. So I'm not a big fan of these whatsoever, and they're gonna get changed out immediately once I get a pair of Ameriglows. Those are gonna get swapped as soon as possible, but again, it's just a shame the Gen 6 still comes with the same Glock plastic sights. I don't want to call them iron. They're not iron sights. Now, talking about the Optic mounting system real quick. Okay, I mentioned earlier in the video that Maple Leaf Firearms did send out this plate. So Glock has now improved their MOS mounting system, which was modular optic system. This Optic mounting system, in my opinion, is a huge improvement over the MOS. It actually allows the optic to sit much lower. And if you had some suppressor height sights, you can actually co-witness with this thing, with this new Optic mounting system. Now, I don't think you could do that with the RCR that I have here because it does sit a little bit higher due to the way that it mounts up and fits in an RMR footprint. However, I do believe that this is a huge improvement no matter what red dot you're running. And I do think that with some suppressor height sights, I could catch a little bit of a co-witness in the bottom of the window with the RCR. Now, Maple Leaf Firearms did design and create a metal version of the plate, which is really cool because the one Glock ships it with is a plastic version. Now, in my last video on the Gen 6 17, I got a lot of flack and caught a lot of pushback from people calling me out and saying, when I was talking about the plastic piece that Glock ships it with, saying that it's a crush washer and Glock says it's more reliable. Now, do I buy that? I don't buy that whatsoever. Now, do I know more than Glock about plastics? No, but just like with the plastic iron sights and they say they're passing the cost savings on, I don't believe them when they say it's a better solution to an actual steel plate, because unlike a crush washer, this plastic plate that they shipped it with actually houses the recoil lugs for the dot itself. So the actual little nubs that go up into the bottom of your red dot optic sit on that plate. And when they're plastic, I'm sorry, they're just not as strong as steel. And I want those to be strong in order to retain zero, in order to handle the recoil and not have my optic moving around as I'm shooting even slightly will over time affect your accuracy and the reliability of your zero. So I love that Maple Leaf come out with their own steel version. Again, you can barely see it in here, but it closes the gap here in the back as well as in the front, which the Glock plastic plate does not do. So it's just overall a much more rigid design and it's gonna last a lot longer in my humble opinion. Again, I don't really buy that cost savings or it's more effective. I just don't. And did I have any issues with it? Technically, no, but I do like and I have more confidence in an actual steel plate. So big shout out to Maple Leaf for sending that out. Now I'm gonna take a quick segue into roasting the RCR because I actually love this optic. However, for the price of this thing, and I understand the restraints Trijicon was under in order to fit it in the RMR footprint, which is the whole idea, is that if you already have a slide cut for an RMR, the RCR will fit right on there. However, this is not a cheap optic whatsoever, and it walked loose on me 4 separate times on 4 separate range trips, which was extremely frustrating. So when I got home the last time from the range and it had walked loose, I put the wrench in there and I torqued it down far beyond what they recommend and actually broke the little tool off. And I'm sure that's probably a feature of the tool so you don't over torque it and damage the housing body. But I think they need to include a stronger tool and they need to allow you to tighten this thing down more, because since I torqued it down and broke that tool off, in fact, the piece was stuck in the screw in my last video, but it actually fell out under recoil the last time I went to the range. But the optic's still tight. It hasn't walked loose yet after I just torqued the ever-living crap out of it. But again, for the price of this optic, I think it's like 800 bucks or something crazy. It just has way too many issues with it walking loose, and it's not a simple screw design that you can just use your fix-it sticks, case or a torque set to tighten it down at the range. It's got a specialized tool. If you don't have it with you, it's quite impossible to find something that'll fit in there to retighten it. So that is a very frustrating thing. I'm gonna give it another chance here. Another thing I wanna mention about the RCR is that the battery life seems to be pretty horrific. I don't know if it's just me. I mean, I have it on a normal battery setting, just like with my RMRs, but the RMRs seem to last much, much longer. I'm using lithium ion Energizer batteries in here, so high quality batteries. I have no idea why they're dying so quickly on me. I've already changed the battery on this thing twice, and I've only had it for about 8 months. So just for a frame of reference, I've changed the battery on my RMR twice, and I've had that thing for 4 years now. So in 8 months, this thing has consumed as much battery as the RMR Type 2 in 4 years. So I have no idea why. I'm very cognizant of when I come home, if it's like on the sun brightness setting, because I was like in the brightest daylight setting, because I was shooting in the middle of the day, I would just turn it down a little bit back to like my concealed carry type setting where I can still see it even with my Surefire light. But I have no idea why it's killing battery so quickly. And the last complaint is this battery cap on the top. You actually need a quarter or a nickel to use it. I have a huge assortment of flathead screwdrivers, and every flathead I try to put in here to loosen it or tighten it back down starts to roll out of that little crevasse because it's deeper in the middle. So I'm sure it's made for a coin, but you actually have to use a coin. You can't use a regular flathead because there's not enough depth on the cap, and then eventually you'll end up stripping it out, which I've kind of done a little bit already, but I was able to fully tighten it down using a nickel. So from now on, I'll have to go find some change in order to remove the battery cap or put it back on. You can't actually use a screwdriver. Now, other than it coming loose constantly, the price, the battery life being terrible, and it being difficult to get the battery cap on and off, it's an okay optic. So I know I just went in and roasted the shit out of this thing. I actually like it, but it's a very frustrating problem to have when you see the price tag on these guys. So I digress. Let's move on to the frame, which is the biggest improvement on the Gen 6 over the Gen 5. As you guys can see, they've improved the stippling pattern. It's much more aggressive. It is a lot better now. They still include the back straps, which I have the medium one on here. I do have really big hands, so I like this added distance it gives me to the face of the trigger. And speaking of the trigger, let's go ahead and ghost the trigger with you guys real quick. Another complaint real quick, I just remembered. Listen how squeaky this thing is. Sounds like your parents' bedroom when you were like 10 years old, right? It sounds pretty bad. And obviously you don't notice that when you're shooting it, but seems a little squeaky. But anyways, let's go ahead and ghost the trigger together, guys. You guys can see. So it's a flat face trigger. It still has that fan blade in the middle for the safety, so you can't push it on the side. It will stop you. But as far as the trigger goes, let's go ahead and ghost it. So you have a little bit of take up. You hit a little bit of a wall. Squishy, and then it breaks. It is pretty much on par with the Gen 5 trigger, in my opinion. It might be a little bit worse even. I don't think it's any better, that's for sure. So you push down, you hit the wall right there. Creep. Oh, you see that creep right there? I'll let it out. There's the wall. There's the creep. There's the break. Now, in practice, when you're shooting it, it feels like a Glock trigger. You don't really notice that. However, it's not a huge improvement, or I don't think it's any improvement over the Gen 5. Moving back into the frame itself, you have these little gas pedal cuts here on the side, which if that's your grip, cool. I don't really grip that way. My thumb's kind of like floating a little bit further back because I'm trying to get as much palm on the gun as possible. So my thumb doesn't even make it all the way up there, but it is kind of cool. It looks good. Looks like a custom stipple job. The biggest improvement on the frame, in my opinion, besides the stippling itself, is the undercut right here. I would have loved to have seen a double undercut, but it's nice that they at least did that so you can get a much higher grip on the gun and you don't get as much wear and tear on your knuckle here if you have big hands like me. So I do love that they did at least that one undercut there from the factory. It does appear to have a slightly more flared magwell than the Gen 5. I wouldn't say it's enough to be like super noticeable or a reason to buy a Gen 6 over a Gen 5, but it is a slightly improved magazine well from what I can tell. And then lastly, something I could have gone without is this extended beaver tail. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have extended it at all, but they should not have extended it this far. I think they could have gone probably like 1/8 of an inch shorter. And if they would have gone between what the Gen 5 is and what this Gen 6 is, I think it would have been perfect. But it is a very long beaver tail and it does catch you on your grip when you're drawing from a holster. I've caught myself kind of coming over and getting caught up on this beaver tail quite a few times. So I'm pretty sure you can just cut that off or mill it down. I don't know if it's hollow. I think it's a solid piece of plastic. So you could just take a Dremel to it if you wanted to. It's not a big enough issue for me to go ahead and start chopping the gun up, but it is something to train around or to be aware of if you're gonna pick one of these up. So one last thing I forgot to mention when talking about the slide is that Glock actually changed their extractor setup so that their plunger isn't in the way of these screws. That has to do with the optic system that the new optic system they created. You don't have to worry about, getting glue Loctite on your extractor spring that was on the Gen 5s right here. So they've changed the design so that it can clear your screw holes for where your optics mount up, which is pretty cool. Again, I've had no issues with the Gen 6. It clears your optic mounting screws so that if you over tighten or if a screw's too long or something like that, you're not gonna have extractor issues. Another thing that I don't hear anybody talking about that is a very nice improvement is for the breakdown. The breakdown levers here stick much further out and they have a much more aggressive texture on them, serration on them. So you can easily pull that guy down in order to pull the slide off. And the Gen 6 does feature the new V-cut type slide, so you can't readily restore these to be MGs with the switch. But lastly, we do have a single piece guide rod once again for the Gen 6s, which Glock claims has better recoil reduction or reliability. I'm not really sure. Gen 5s work just fine, and this one works just fine as well, although it is quite squeaky, I will say that. So what is my conclusion on the Gen 6 Glock? I will say this is probably my favorite Glock just due to the improved stippling. From the factory, it's one of the best Glocks you can buy. I do kind of still prefer my Gen 5 19X, which has a custom stipple job, a double undercut, and all of the same improvements that this thing has. It's got a custom milled slide, so it's milled directly for the RMR I have on it, so there's no issue with slop or play. I do believe this is the best factory Glock that you can purchase today. I will say this is my everyday carry currently. It's been for the last month and a half. I've been very happy with it. I think it performs really well. Is it enough of an improvement to upgrade from the Gen 5 to Gen 6? The answer is simply no. Especially if you've already done a few customizations to your Gen 5, like a stipple job, or if you've already added a Radian to it, or you've had your slide milled. If it wasn't an MOS, then I certainly don't think it's worth upgrading for that reason. But with that being said, it is a small incremental improvement over the Gen 5 Glock in some ways. And in some ways, like the beaver tail, it's not an improvement and this still comes with the same iron sights. So I think it's a very small incremental change. And a lot of people are probably gonna be mad about me saying that. I still bought it with my own money. I still love it, but I don't recommend you going out, rushing out and buying one because it's just not that much better, if at all, than the Gen 5. But that's gonna wrap it up for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you guys do like this content, please like, comment, subscribe. I know it's played out, but it means a lot to me. Also, check out rangedaybro.you-know-what. Check out the discounts page. It's a way for you to support the channel and save some money at the same time. Subscribe to our email list. Check out the Patreon. Follow me over on Instagram and X. And as always, Christ is King. Drink a lot of water. Stay safe. Stay dangerous. Range Day Bro out.